Homeschool, a novel by Casey Giltner. Chapter 1. One Last Ride. The path was more treacherous than she could have imagined. Mira pedaled as fast as she could, furiously, pushing forward relentlessly through the mud, along a narrow dirt trail of a dense mountainside forest. The rider ahead of her skillfully wove back and forth through the trees, pulling further and further ahead with every bend of the trail. Mira tried to keep pace, but her second wind was long since gone, a distant memory, and she sensed no third or fourth wind coming to save her. Her mountain bike strained against the incline. The gears clanked as she shifted in vain, hoping the equipment would do the work for her. But the climb only grew steeper, the journey seemingly more impossible. Come on, Mira, you can do this. The thought ground its way into her mind. The only thing stopping you is you. She grit her teeth and pumped her knees, grunting with each shift of the gears, each rotation of the chain. The narrow trail now ran the edge of a ravine. Her nerves seized her by the throat as the drop grew larger with each switchback. Up, 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 until finally she broke through the tree line. A majestic peak stood before her, overlooking a pristine valley of rolling foothills. The other rider was already there waiting for her, pulled to a stop, shaking loose her helmet hair. Mira knew that hair well. She had the same bushy auburn waves, the same narrow eyebrows, the same vibrant ocean eyes, the same dimple high on the right cheek. Besides the 20 extra years of age, Mira and her mother looked identical. Before she'd even stopped, Mira dropped off her bike and collapsed to the ground. She was beyond exhausted. Her legs hurt in ways she had never experienced. Her mother smiled. I told you this one would be harder. Mira was too busy sucking in oxygen to answer. Her mother crouched down and lay on the ground next to her. Arms over your head. Open up your lungs. She lifted her own arms above her head to demonstrate. Mira copied her without thought, as she often did. Mira was naturally a trusting person, and her mother had given no reason not to accept her advice verbatim. When she eventually gathered her breath, she ventured a question. Can we do this one again tomorrow? Nice try. Tomorrow's a school day, her mother said with a wry smile. Maybe you can bring a friend with us next time. Mira exhaled, tired of receiving the suggestion. I like it being just us, she said. And it was true. She loved spending time with her mother. And the few friends she had at school were actually more like acquaintances. They were friendly because they shared a space and because it would be more work to be unfriendly. They were not the type you invited mountain biking. They'd been biking together for years, a mother-daughter activity that Mira was more than happy to indulge her in, but one of many activities her mother worried would slip away from her in the coming months and years. She knew the day would come, and come soon, where Mira would want to be with anyone but her mother. A day when Mira would move on to bigger and better things. But that day hadn't come, and she was going to enjoy every moment while it lasted, no matter how small. Well, you're 14. We'll see how long that lasts. Mira's mother smiled at her with a hint of melancholy. She had a way of looking at Mira as though she were the only person on Earth, as though the rest of the world was irrelevant, as though life was a secret the two of them shared. You're special, Mira. There's no one else in the world like you. You have to say that. You're my mom. I mean it. It's true. I tried to deny it for a long time, but there's something inside you that just isn't inside the rest of us, her mother said, staring purposefully at Mira. Mira didn't know what to say to that. Her mother thought the world of her, but sometimes she heaped too much goodness on her shoulders. Mira was not that good. She had the same desires and tempers as anyone else. She felt a pang of awkwardness, intense and roiling as the moment lingered. She felt her mother's emotion too deeply, and in her discomfort turned away. Race you down! Mira jumped to her feet and made a mad scramble for her bike. She was already on the trail before she realized that her mother wasn't with her. She had lingered at the peak, soaking in one last look at the valley. Mira followed her mother's gaze, really seeing the valley, only now noticing the plague-besotted spruce trees mixed in with the healthy ones. From a distance, the dead trees gave the valley a purplish hue, a visible cancer making its way strategically, methodically, across the mountainside, one tree at a time. Mira returned her gaze to her mother. A brisk wind swirled through. Her mother stiffened uncomfortably. Her curls beat against her brow. But something held her. A sadness. Some memory, perhaps. Some aching nostalgia. Her mother turned and caught Mira watching. Were those tears in her mother's eyes? Or was it the wind? Before Mira could inquire, her mother shook off the despondence and broke into a broad smile. Come on! The ride down was easier. Once they hit pavement, they hardly had to pedal. Mira loved being so close to the mountains. It was as though you were being hugged by Mother Nature herself, consistently dwarfed by the size of the world around you. Their neighborhood was a way station between two worlds. On one side, they were nestled against the nascent beginnings of the Rocky Mountains. On the other side, the slow descent to Denver, the plains, and the farmlands beyond. On one side, the pure expanse of nature. On the other, the constant race for man to command every flat patch of grass on the earth. Between these extremes, Boulder blazed its own trail, often going unnoticed by the world at large. Full of oddballs, hippies, and freethinkers, it was an easy place to get lost, to find yourself, to start anew, or to disappear completely. Big enough to blend in, small enough to see trouble coming. From the moment they arrived, Mira and her mother fit in perfectly. They lived in an unincorporated enclave of homes, 1 block beyond the Boulder City line, entrenched at the dead end of Wild Canyon Drive in a modest blue ranch house with pink shutters. No one asked why they'd come or what they'd left behind. Here, it was about what the future held, not what the past clung to. Here they lived on equal terms. They asked for little and provided more than they took. They rolled along past a neighborhood church. Mira let go of the handlebars, coasting down the road with arms stretched out to the side. Her mother glanced back, smiling at the sight of Mira basking in the cool evening air. Mira was lost in the moment. So lost, she forgot to check the intersection ahead. So lost, she didn't see the movement out of the corner of her eye. So lost, she didn't notice the vehicle as it raced toward her. So lost, she never heard the squeal of tires. So lost, she never heard her mother's voice or the call of her name. So lost, she never felt the impact. Chapter 2. The Hospital. Everything was black. In the deepest of darkness, Mira floated, untethered from place and time. Not feeling, not seeing, a void as empty as a black hole. That she existed at all was the only solid thing she could grasp. Where was she? But wait. She could hear something. A low, droning sound permeated the darkness. There were whispers, feet shuffling, the hum of electronic equipment. Mira, can you hear me? Someone spoke to her. It was a low, cool, female voice without inflection. Mira, I want you to open your eyes. That's right. She had eyes. Eyelids, a body even. She didn't want to open them. She didn't know why. But she knew enough, felt enough, to know that when she opened them, nothing would be the same. Wherever she was, it was more comfortable feeling nothing than feeling whatever was yet to come. A little voice spoke up from deep inside her. Open your eyes. There's nothing stopping you. Eventually you'll have to. Mira tore herself away from the pale serenity of the void and opened her eyes. The fluorescent lights overhead stung her with each flicker of her leaden eyelids. The world was a blur. Turn off the lights, the cool female voice commanded. The lights dimmed. Her vision began to clear. Her eyes came into focus. She was in a hospital bed. Her face was bandaged. She brought a hand up and pressed against the bandage. But there was no pain. In fact, physically, she couldn't feel a thing. She was numb from head to toe. She became aware now of a woman's face staring at her from the foot of her bed, kindly but battle-hardened, graying lightly at the edges, wary but enduring. Mira, the face started, you're in the intensive care unit of the Boulder Community Hospital. Do you remember how you got here? Mira tilted her head from side to side. There was an accident. You were hit by a car. Fragments flickered through Mira's mind, a flash of brown. The car? Or her hair? Pain. And then darkness. Do you remember anything? The briefest flash of her mother, sprawled on splintered concrete, motionless. Anything at all? More fragments flickered through her mind. The wind in her hair, the grind of her bike chain, but then searing pain. Gasping in shock, unable to move, paralyzed, watching blood spool from her mother just beyond her reach. I don't know, Mira gasped out. I'm not sure. A car. Brown, idling nearby, the screech of its tires, then speeding away. But they were just fragments, not real memories. More like feelings. They were indescribable, no matter how much she might want to. She didn't have any answers for this woman. All she had were questions. Mira summoned the courage, swallowed, and looked up at the doctor with her last ounce of hope. She'd forever remember this room, the sterile whites and blues, the cheap seasonal decor on the doors and windows, the face of the professionally empathetic doctor who no doubt delivered the same news on a daily basis. "Where's my mom?" "I'm so sorry, Mira." The doctor kept talking, but Mira didn't hear another word. Chapter 3. Goodbye. The funeral home was cold. All spotless white walls, austere and bleached, wiped clean of the emotion that no doubt flowed forth each and every week. Not much different from the hospital room Mira had recently vacated. She sat alone, as far from the others as she could manage. Those in attendance threw her the occasional worried glance, but no one dared approach aside from the social worker, who, like clockwork, would check in on her every 20 minutes. Did she need anything? Was it all a bit too much? What from the outside might seem kind and attentive was in reality, Mira knew, not attentiveness, but the social worker's own selfishness, a desire to be done and back to the comfort of her own privileged life. Even at Mira's tender age, she could observe the extent to which the social worker's cumbersome caseload had sapped the passion with which she might have once attended to her responsibilities. Her clients were now merely burdens, Mira amongst them. Mira, on the other hand, had no such inclination to leave. The second this ended, it was back to the group home that stank of garbage bins in need of emptying and children in need of parenting. She was in no rush, despite the morbid setting, despite the number of people watching her, and despite her very public new role as the sad orphan. Her bloodshot eyes scanned the room. Mourners milled throughout. Indistinguishable faces swam in random patterns, blurring together in a haze of bland unspectacularity. She knew exactly what that great mass of pointlessness was saying and thinking, all spewing their unspecific generalities. "We're so sorry. What a tragedy. She was so young. We'll pray for you. You'll be in our thoughts." Or just downright gossiping. "Did they ever find the driver? How did she survive the accident? With hardly a scratch, it's a miracle, thank God." How few of them actually knew her mother. Was there a single one amongst them? Mira doubted it. They only knew her from the co-op she managed, or the parents' association at school, or from seeing her around the neighborhood. No one here knew how she tied off her hair slightly to the right, how she scrunched her nose when she was upset, how she took both almond milk and vanilla creamer in her coffee, how she loved oranges but despised orange juice, how she bristled at rules she found stupid, how she snorted when she laughed too suddenly. No, none of them knew her. Not really. Not like Mira did. But it wasn't just her mother, Mira realized with a pang of unbearable sadness. It was her as well. Who was left who knew Mira now that her mother was gone? They were a pair, free spirits, both of them, a unique, irreplaceable set. All they had was each other. But one of them was gone now, and the other was adrift, lost at sea, and no one was searching for her. Across the room, there was a stir. A part in the crowd had revealed a new arrival, an aberration in the monotony. A reserved Midwestern woman dressed in all black. Mira didn't recognize her. She was charismatic, yet reverent, pious, yet with an air of revelation to her. She drew all eyes to her, promptly holding court among the other guests. Mira watched her with curiosity. The woman entered something like a tornado. She was a vortex, sucking all else into her path, leaving nothing in her wake. The new center of gravity in the adjoining room. The funeral now, quite literally, revolved around her. The entire group had been positioned strategically by their relation to the coffin. Now they were positioned in relation to the stranger. The woman's sharp eyes found Mira's. Her face lit up. The eyes lingered. Satisfaction spread across her lips, into her cheeks. Mira felt something too, a boiling intensity, roiling more severe with each prolonged moment that she held the woman's gaze. Sensing a painful conversation coming her way and wanting to avoid it, she forced a blink and ducked from the room, away from the woman's prying gaze. She slipped quickly through the crowd, with her arms folded, head tipped, and a scolding sneer, determined to deter well-wishers and prematurely fend off anyone who dared approach her. She found her way to the water fountain outside the bathrooms. She bent down and took a deep drink. She basked in the small serenity the cold, wet water offered her, glancing delicately across her lips. She felt she could stay right here for hours. Unfortunately, She felt a hand slip over her shoulder. Mira! Mira knew before she turned around. It was her, of course, the woman from the other room. At close range, there was something familiar about her. The hard-as-glass stare, the perfectly apportioned black hair held tight by an elegant gold clip, the firmness of presence. It took a moment, but eventually her memory triggered. Aunt Vivian? The woman beamed and pulled Mira into a hug. I wasn't sure you'd remember me. Her voice was as warm and compassionate, but unyielding. She couldn't have been more than 40 or 45, and yet her aura seemed ancient, like someone from a different century, someone who had existed for an eternity and always would. I would have been here sooner, but the drive from Wisconsin was, let's just say I've had better. She finally released Mira and stepped back to look her over. I didn't know you would come, Mira admitted. She was my sister, Vivian replied, pursing her lips, as if there was ever any doubt. I haven't seen you in... Mira couldn't actually place how long it had been. A flutter of images and moments, all of them 6 or 7 or maybe even 8 years ago and foggy at best, came flooding back to Mira. She grasped for something solid, a memory to tell her who or what type of person Vivian was. But every image was like a snowflake, dissolving in her hand the second she keyed in on something. Vivian existed more as a concept than as an actual person Mira had once known. A long time, Mira finally landed on. The important thing is that I'm here now, Vivian reassured her. Mira tried to smile, to agree that it was important, but the emptiness in her heart was all-consuming, and she could not will the familial niceties she knew she was expected to perform. Before the silence could grow too strained, though, Vivian cut through it. There was clearly too much she wanted to say, so if Mira didn't want to, Vivian could and would carry the conversation alone. You know, I dreamt I'd be seeing you. I have the most vivid dreams, truly. If I'd known the circumstances, well, I can't imagine what you must be feeling, seeing her like that. Vivian cut herself off. Something in Mira's face had soured. What is it, dear? I haven't. Haven't what? Seen her. They won't let me. They won't let you? Her own daughter? It was true. The funeral director had forbidden it, and the social worker had taken his side. She didn't care what her mother looked like, Mira had protested. Didn't matter whether she was torn into 1,000 pieces, but she had been outvoted. There was no one to back Mira up, until now. Vivian took another hard look at Mira, eyes piercing right through her, deep down to her insides. It made Mira feel open, vulnerable, and a bit at risk. But she hadn't the energy to fight it. Whatever Vivian saw inside her at that moment, it spurred her to action. Are you sure you want to? Mira nodded. She was determined. I'll be right back. Vivian strode down the hall and approached the funeral director, a wiry dilettante with too much mustache for the size of his face. They quickly descended into a heated discussion. He shook his head emphatically, but eventually, Vivian's persistence won out. He shook his head and marched across the room. Vivian beckoned Mira to her side. Multitudes of eyes followed them across the lobby and into the service room, where the coffin remained with the rows of flower bouquets and empty seats. Vivian closed the double doors, sealing the 3 of them in privacy with the coffin. The harried funeral director undid the entire series of thick silver latches and pried open the casket. Cautiously, Mira stepped forward and peered inside. Her breathing slowed. This body was no longer her mother's. Half her face was gone, replaced with a horrid mix of blood and bone laden with patches of hair. What was left of her skin had gone waxy. What pieces were there were largely only makeup. Vivian looked away respectfully, covering her mouth with a gloved hand, slightly sick to her stomach. But Mira wasn't fazed. She stared at her mother, intense and unblinking, feeling herself sucked in, a warm embrace of death calling to her, beckoning her closer. Death itself is nothing to fear, a little voice in her head muttered. Death is a mercy. It's life that's terrifying. Her mother seemed to grow stiffer by the second, the failed attempts at applying makeup now crumbling off. Seconds passed, maybe minutes. Finally, Vivian wrapped an arm around Mira's shoulder. Okay? Mira blinked, breaking the spell, before ripping her eyes away from the corpse. Vivian nodded to the funeral director, bouncing on his toes nearby. He gladly lowered the casket shut. I know that was difficult, dear, Vivian said consolingly. Mira mumbled under her breath. That was the strange thing. There was nothing difficult about it. A corpse was just a body, Mira thought. It wasn't her mother. It was nothing, just a pale imitation of her mother. Her mother was gone, forever, taken from her cruelly. Whoever had done it was a horrible person and a coward, and they deserved punishment. The stronger, the better. This world was rotten and only getting more rotten by the day. Her mother had protected her from just how rotten the whole stinking place was. But she wasn't here anymore, and no one could protect her any longer, nor shield her eyes from seeing the world for what it was. Hell. Chapter 4. Solutions. Sorry about your mom. Yeah, it really sucks. Two girls stood blocking her path. Mira nodded politely. Thanks. They didn't move. There was no easy way around them. It was the funeral reception. There were 36 or so people Mira knew but didn't know, and a folding table with a stale party sub, red cups, napkins, and paper plates. The girls were from her school, a new age forestry experiment for the children of hippies called Experiences. And before this very moment, Mira was pretty sure these girls had never spoken to her willingly of their own accord, or at least without outright disdain. For whatever insights students gained at Experiences, true compassion for someone dubbed a loser, outsider, and weirdo of the highest order was not one of them. The girls took a deep breath, prepared for a long, emotional conversation, but that was the last thing Mira wanted. She pushed between them abruptly. Excuse me. Not more than 2 steps away, Mira overheard their swift transition back to their honest selves. God, she's so fucking weird. It's her eyes, the way she stares at you. Such a freak. No wonder her mom checked out early. Mira tried to ignore them, tried to pretend she hadn't heard, but she felt the tears brimming and fled quickly. She weaved through the crowd, eyes down, lest she stare at anyone else unintentionally. She overheard her name more than once, but she pushed past until she found herself on the second-floor landing. Safely alone, she let the tears escape. Up here, she was able to see everything, yet was at enough of a remove that she'd be able to avoid any further unwanted conversations. The mood, though lighter than at the funeral home, was sour. Who had made the decision to hold the reception in the dead woman's house? That's so messed up. That the funeral reception was being held at Mira's house was a cruel twist, allowing her back in her home for a few non-private moments before being taken away for good. One last tease of what she had and what she'd lost. What she wanted more than anything right now was for all of them to go, to leave her alone here. She considered the rooms upstairs. There was her mother's and her own. She hadn't stepped a foot in either since the accident, but now that she was here, the opportunity presenting itself, she was having trouble entering them. She tried to summon her courage. She'd start with her own bedroom. Right on cue, she heard the creak of stairs beneath her. It was the social worker. She stopped halfway up and let her voice cover the remaining distance. Mira, it's time to go. I don't want to leave yet. I'm sorry, but I have to get home to my family. Mira tasted iron in her mouth. She swallowed. The social worker, oblivious to Mira's distress, waved her along. Come on. Why can't I just stay here? Mira asked. She was too exhausted, too emotionally spent to bother hiding the contempt in her voice. The social worker sighed. We've talked about this. You're still a minor. In 4 years, you can do anything you want, but right now, you're a ward of the state. That means I'm responsible for you. I don't like it at that place. It's as good as any other place. I'm sorry, but you don't have a choice. Mira gritted her teeth and followed the social worker down the stairs. Newfound teenage annoyance bared plainly for all to see. It isn't fair, she mumbled to herself. Life isn't fair, a small voice inside her head retorted. But death should be. Mira took one last glance. This place had once been full of life, full of color. The table where they'd shared every meal. The doorway where they marked Mira's height every year. So much joy. And now, it was all gone. They were halfway out the door when Aunt Vivian appeared in the doorway behind them. Is Mira leaving? She asked, touching the social worker lightly on the elbow. We hardly had a chance to speak. I'm Vivian, Mira's aunt. Oh, the social worker's eyes did backflips. Mira didn't mention she had an aunt. I'm afraid we've grown a bit distant over the years, regretfully. Mira watched as the gears began turning in the social worker's mind. She knew exactly the calculus playing out inside. Here was an opportunity to be done with Mira. If she played this right, she'd have one less case, one less annoyance, one less problem. The social worker evened out her face and, in the calmest tone she could find, asked Vivian, "May I speak with you? Privately?" Aunt Vivian and the social worker went back into the house in search of privacy. Mira wormed her way closer, spying around the corner to listen in. "The real issue is that there wasn't any will found," the social worker was explaining. "No will? That isn't like my sister. I can clear it with the court tomorrow if you're truly willing to take her on. Under these circumstances, I think it would be best for everyone." Vivian hesitated, seemingly overwhelmed by the request. By chance, she glanced over, spotting Mira eavesdropping at the end of the hall. A sudden pale passed over her. Was it hesitance in her eyes or something else? Annoyance? Fear? Whatever it was that paused her, it passed in a fleeting moment, and her firm resolve returned. "Of course. It's what my sister would have wanted." Chapter 5. Great Things. The funeral reception had long since ended, the guests long departed, a cavalcade of paper plates, napkins, and cracked plastic cups left littered about, the only lingering tangible proof the event had ever happened. Mira sat curled on the rough red brick of the fireplace hearth. It was uncomfortable beneath her, but she didn't move. She stared deep into the dancing flames, tuning out the world around her, soaking in every last second of its silence, every last moment before she would have to re-engage with the world. The clatter of heels on hardwood pierced the silence. Vivian appeared from the hallway, carrying the remains of the half-eaten party sub. "Look at this place. Some people have no respect." Vivian was clearly someone who could not abide uncleanliness. Judging from the prim and pressed outfit, the straight-as-arrow posture, and her overall demeanor, Mira had no doubt her house was spotless. Mira cast her gaze back into the fire. She wasn't in the mood for menial chit-chat. For one brief moment, Mira had been given hope that she wouldn't have to leave her house. Her home. She could stay here forever. But of course, she hadn't thought it through. Vivian didn't live in Colorado. That she'd even stepped foot in a place as reputable as Boulder was out of character for someone clearly so straight-laced. Hope is a placebo, a distraction, a mask. Hope is unnecessary. "So, are you excited?" Vivian lowered herself and sat beside Mira on the hearth. "Excited?" Mira replied. "About what?" "Maybe excited is the wrong word. Are you ready for the next chapter to begin? A new adventure? A new calling?" "I guess." "Oh, come on now. Wisconsin's not that bad. It's really not that different from Colorado. We just have more cheese. You like cheese, right?" "My mom and I are vegan." Vivian's face reacted harshly, despite her best efforts. "Well, they make cheese out of cashews now, you know." "It's just—" Mira tried to soften her harsh reaction, but she kept bumping up against something. "I don't want to move to Wisconsin." "You know, you are Wisconsin born and bred, Mira. It's a homecoming," Vivian explained. It didn't help. "I don't even remember anything about it," Mira complained. "Can't you just move to Colorado?" It was an unfair request, and Mira knew it. But it didn't dampen her disappointment when Vivian sighed. "I'm sorry, Mira. If I could drop everything, I would. But I have responsibilities. People depend on me. My church depends on me. It's not fair," Mira pouted. "Life is very often difficult, and it is rarely fair." Vivian's lip quivered. She was trying to hold up a veneer, but it was cracked now, and quite suddenly her face cratered under a wave of repressed tears. The veneer had finally shattered. Mira looked away angrily for a moment. How dare her aunt make this about her? It was Mira that was grieving. It was Mira who had lost everything. It was Mira that had to leave her home. Mira that had to move across the country. Mira that had to have a new calling, whatever that meant. She's lost something too. Mira considered Vivian. She had lost something. A sister. A piece of her childhood. A piece of herself, perhaps. She was family, after all. Maybe Mira wasn't completely alone in this. Her aunt was here, after all, making the effort. "I'm sorry, and Vivian, I didn't mean to make you cry." But Vivian continued to cry. So Mira made an additional offering. She laid a hand on Vivian's shoulder and, through grimaced teeth, uttered something she did not believe in the slightest. Wisconsin will be great. Vivian launched herself forward and pulled Mira into a desperate hug. Mira fidgeted at first, feeling herself trapped, before settling into the hug.
It's not your fault. I shouldn't be putting this on you. I'm just so happy.
Mira twitched. Happy? How could she be happy? What could she possibly be happy about on a day like today? Vivian continued, her sobs lessening.
Just so happy you're coming back with me. Death has a funny way of bringing people together, and I always loved our time together when you were little. I never could have kids of my own, but I had you.
Mira tried to break the hug. Vivian took Mira by the shoulders and forced her to meet her iron gaze.
I know I'll never be able to replace your mother, Mira, but I just know you'll do great things, and I'll be right by your side, every step of the way.
Chapter 6. For Sale. Packing went fast. Before Mira knew it, the house was empty. Her things were piled unceremoniously into a moving truck by two heavy-set men in branded blue t-shirts and matching hats. A for sale sign haunted the front lawn, taunting her each time she glanced outside. A man in a seersucker suit with a blinding smile paraded strangers through the house every few hours. He spoke with great passion about the original hardwood floors and backsplash tiling in the kitchen, whatever that was. Garbage piled up on the curb. Two wrecked bicycles poked out from the depths of the heap. Her mother's things overflowed into the gutter. There were yoga mats and blenders and abstract sculptures, tennis rackets and romance novels and antique vases. Did her mom really own all this stuff? Had it really been inside the house this whole time? It seemed like too much for so small a house, so tidy a woman. And to discard it all, it seemed too fast for so recent a death. The man in seersucker shuttled her from room to room, always standing directly between Mira and whoever was touring the house, as though she were a hole in the drywall he hoped they wouldn't notice. Whatever he did, however he did it, it must have worked. The man disappeared almost as fast as he'd come, though the sign remained. The buyer apparently an anonymous cash offer from abroad. No questions were asked, and the money came in on time. Mr. Seersucker crowed about his success to anyone who would listen, pontificating about his particular method, which seemed to Mira to be no more than an overtly false Zillow listing, right up until the moment Vivian shuttled him out the front door with great finality. And just like that, they had to be out. Vivian directed the whole operation like a general, ruthless in her execution, the landline phone never straying far from her ear. Mira watched it all from the stairwell banister, a caged animal, as the zoo warden dictated her fate. Yes, the sale went through. No problems. We should be there tomorrow by 5 if things go smoothly. No, that won't do. Just keep things as simple as possible. Every so often, Vivian opened her purse and took out a small, red leather-bound notebook to record some notation. As soon as she finished writing, she would wrap it shut and place it back in her purse, always in the same spot, without fail. She seemed to want a record of everything, her thoughts, ideas, and events as they happened. Nothing was too small to make note of. Everything was observed and recorded. Though it had only been a few days, Mira found she couldn't help but admire her aunt. She was organized. She was decisive. She was always in control. Mira never felt like those things. She was messy. She could rarely make a quick decision. And she seemed to be losing more and more control of her life by the hour. You should be packing, Vivian called up to Mira without looking up from what she was writing, subtly informing Mira of the eyes in the back of her head, letting Mira know that she knew she was being observed. Just bring the essentials. The movers will take everything else. Mira's bedroom furniture was already gone, but her personal belongings had yet to make it into any of the many open boxes stacked at attention and awaiting their call. Each time she packed something, it felt like she was burying another small piece of herself. She knew she was being silly. She would see all these things again in a matter of days. And yet, as she considered a stuffed animal, a small llama named Loris she had since infancy, she felt intuitively that she would never see it again. Or, when she did, it would be through the eyes of a very different person. She let go of the llama. It disappeared into a box. Her will to continue went with it. Her eyes drifted aimlessly until they reached a door down the hall, her mother's room. The door closed tight. Mira hadn't yet gathered the will to open it, but there was precious little time left now. She held the doorknob for a moment before daring to turn it. The door creaked on its hinges as it opened a foot. She held at the threshold, peering inside, using the door as a shield. The room was untouched since her mother's death. Clothes lay strewn about as though she were still coming home later that day. It was lived in, an organized mess. It was colorful, all dream catchers and abstract oil paintings and precious gemstones. It had soul, her mother's unique, 1 in a million, no, 1 in a trillion soul. Her mother had been most at ease, most unguarded, most rawly herself, right here in this room. Mira picked up one of her mother's red shirts from the bed. It smelled just like her. Lilac, coffee, and a hint of something else, maybe curry? She must have worn this shirt dozens of times. She might have worn it the very day of the accident, the way it lay there on the bed, as though tossed aside mid-stride. Mira tried to remember, but her memory failed her. It had been doing that, her brain, that is. After the accident, everything had become very quiet. They said it was a concussion, but soon after, her thoughts became overwhelming, an avalanche of feelings cascading on her constantly. It made recalling memories and the particulars more difficult, no matter how hard she focused. She looked around the room. There was only one picture frame, a Polaroid of the two of them at Pike's Peak, the blinding sun hovering just behind Mira's head like a crown. She remembered that trip. They had taken the train, winding slowly up the mountainside. They'd eaten donuts at the cafe at the top. There had been a sudden, frightening snowstorm on the way back down. Why hadn't they taken more pictures? It seemed so obvious now. There was no social media account to go scroll through. Her mother hadn't forbid it, but Mira, like her mother, had just never seen the point. Why stop to take pictures when you were living in the now, as her mother always emphasized? She knew it set her apart from the other kids her age, but Mira had always had a hard time connecting with her peers. They seemed to have so little in common. But why no photo albums? Why no family portraits? Where was the sense of their shared history? Where was the record of their relationship, of all the time spent together? Mira sat on the bed, straining to picture her mother alive in this room. The rhythms of her life were already fading. Mira grabbed the lone photo and held it to her chest for dear life. Behind the photo, something lay on the nightstand. A red crystal necklace, carefully coiled, glinting now in the sunlight. Mira took it in hand and gazed deep into its facets. The crystal was beautiful, but jagged and untamed. A flaw deep inside sparked at just the right angle. It felt like her. Chapter 7. The Departure. No matter the preparation, the departure still came quick. Mira lingered in the house until she could no longer justify delaying her aunt, who had long ago left her alone to wait patiently in the car outside while Mira said her last goodbyes. Mira had adopted both her mother's red shirt and the crystal necklace as her own. The Pikes Peak picture was now nestled in her backpack, slung tight across her chest with her other essentials, unwilling to let it from her grasp for even a moment. The house was empty. All that remained was the liberated dust that hung in the air, awaiting its new masters. Mira took a last deep breath. The house seemed to exhale with her. Dust particles swirled upward. For a brief moment, she thought she could hear footsteps upstairs. But it was just ambient noise. It was just an empty house now. Only wood and concrete. Really, there was nothing to say goodbye to. Finally, with nothing left to cling to, Mira stepped outside and closed the door. Aunt Vivian's car was old, an oversized brown sedan that lumbered rather than drove. She had never seen the emblem on the front hood before. It had been luxurious once. A foreign import, maybe? When she got into the car, Vivian did a slight double-take at the wardrobe change, but didn't betray anything further. She reached over and gave Mira's hand a squeeze, providing her best attempt at motherly comfort. But it was a pale imitation. Vivian's hand was cold and clammy, and the effort was clumsy. "Ready to go?" Mira nodded. No sooner had she pulled the car door shut than she recoiled. "It smells," Mira commented, scrunching her nose. Something rancid stung at her nostrils. Only now did she notice the ashtray nearly overflowing with cigarette butts. Mira found it curious. The very idea cut against her vision of her aunt in her mind. That she might have a weakness, a vice, even one as tame as cigarettes, seemed impossible. "I know, I've been trying to quit," Vivian admitted. "I was doing so well, too, but on the drive here—" "You know you'll die," Mira said. Her aunt gave her a sharp look, surprised by the harshness of Mira's tone. "Yes, yes." Vivian waved her concerns away. I know. Don't worry. You'll get used to the smell." Vivian started the engine, cutting herself off. They pulled out of the driveway and rolled down the street. Mira turned around to watch her house as it faded into the distance. It grew smaller and smaller until it became nothing more than a blur. She wiped at the first few stray tears, but they just kept coming. The ride was long. The hours blended together. Mira rested her head against the window, watching the monotonous passing landscape without feeling. Eastern Colorado, Nebraska, Iowa, an endless sea of characterless earth broken up only by the occasional windmill. "What type of music do you like?" Vivian fiddled with the radio, moving on quickly from anything even remotely modern. "Do you play any instruments? I played piano when I was your age." Mira mumbled a non-response, watching a pasture pass by, noting the pack of pure white sheep at play in the grass. "What about art? Do you paint? I myself do some drawing from time to time, when I'm feeling inspired." "I like sports." "What kind of sports?" "I like snowboarding, biking." "Those aren't sports." "Yes, they are." "Those sound dangerous." "That's why they're fun." "You should really try drawing. I find it very enlightening." "I'm not very artistic." "All things take practice." "Mm. You'll love it. I just know you will." Just then, something ran out in front of the car. But Vivian's eyes weren't on the road. They were on Mira. "Look out!" Mira yelled. Vivian gasped and slammed on the brake. But too late. Homeschool is brought to you by Wonder Peak Media. Written by Casey Giltner. Homeschool was read by me, Zoe Reed. Produced by Ava Provolo. Edited by Reed Barron. Music by Young Jun Kim. Artwork by Kim Jacobson.